Welcome to Strides to Solutions podcast. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're talking about something that might completely change how you see your own mind. There's something happening in your brain right now that you're probably not aware of. Your mind is constantly creating stories about everything that happens to you. Someone doesn't text you back, and instantly your brain creates a narrative. Maybe they're mad at you, maybe they don't care, maybe you said something wrong. But here's what's fascinating: none of these stories are facts, they're interpretations. And research shows that changing these interpretations can literally transform your life. I want you to think about two people who lose their jobs on the same day, same company, same circumstances. One person sees this as proof they're not good enough, evidence that they'll never succeed. The other sees it as an opportunity to explore new directions, maybe even a blessing in disguise. Same event, completely different emotional outcomes. The difference isn't the situation, it's the frame. This process we call reframing sits at the heart of human resilience. It's not about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine. It's about recognizing that multiple interpretations of any experience are usually possible, and we can choose the ones that serve our well being rather than sabotage it. The research on this is absolutely compelling. Studies consistently show that reframing supports resilience, well being, and recovery from setbacks more effectively than suppression or avoidance. When we actively change how we interpret negative events, we predict higher resilience, greater post traumatic growth, and improved psychological well being. People who habitually use reframing demonstrate a superior ability to bounce back from adversity and actually experience positive changes after distressing events. But here's what's really remarkable: this isn't just about feeling better emotionally. Reframing helps individuals extract meaning from setbacks, engage constructively with emotions, and adaptively process trauma, leading to better adjustment and recovery over time. During the COVID-19 pandemic, positive reframing emerged as the most beneficial coping strategy for improving quality of life and reducing depression and anxiety. Now, contrast this with what most people do naturally. When we suppress our emotions or avoid dealing with challenges, we might get temporary relief, but we're actually undermining our long term resilience and psychological health. Suppression and avoidance are like taking a painkiller for a broken bone without setting the fracture. You might feel better momentarily, but you're creating bigger problems down the road. Let me tell you about the different ways researchers understand reframing, because this isn't just one technique. It's a comprehensive approach to human adaptation that shows up across multiple therapeutic traditions. In cognitive therapies, particularly trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, reframing appears as cognitive restructuring. This is a process that helps individuals identify and challenge maladaptive thoughts about traumatic events and replace them with more balanced adaptive interpretations. The research consistently shows this cognitive restructuring as a core component of trauma focused CBT, aiming to reduce distress and promote recovery by altering negative beliefs and self perceptions related to trauma. What I find particularly compelling is how positive reframing connects to self compassion and post traumatic growth, helping individuals reinterpret negative emotions and events in more constructive ways. This connection suggests that reframing isn't just about changing thoughts, it's about fundamentally altering our relationship with ourselves and our experiences. But cognitive therapies represent just one lens through which we can understand reframing. Narrative therapies take a different approach entirely, focusing on reconstructing personal stories about traumatic experiences rather than just changing individual thoughts. This perspective emphasizes the profound power of storytelling to help individuals make sense of trauma, find meaning, and regain agency in their lives. The process becomes empowering in a way that purely cognitive approaches might miss, allowing individuals to rebuild their identities and life stories after trauma. Narrative reframing can include attachment oriented strategies where the focus shifts to reinterpreting relational dynamics and losses through an attachment lens to foster healing and connection. These approaches recognize that our stories about ourselves are inevitably stories about our relationships with others. When we change how we understand our connections, past, present, and future, we change fundamental aspects of our identity and our capacity for intimacy and trust. Then we have trauma informed therapies, which often integrate reframing as a comprehensive means to help clients process trauma, reduce symptoms, and promote resilience. These approaches might combine cognitive restructuring with narrative techniques, sometimes adding somatic or experiential methods like trauma sensitive yoga that support the reframing of bodily and emotional responses to trauma. What particularly interests me about experiential reframing is how it uses real life resource experiences to help clients shift their perspectives and coping strategies. This moves beyond just changing thoughts or stories to actually creating new felt experiences that can serve as reference points for different ways of being in the world. When we step back and look at these different approaches, we see that while cognitive approaches focus on changing maladaptive thoughts, narrative therapies emphasize reconstructing personal meaning, and trauma informed models often integrate both, sometimes adding somatic elements. Yet all of them aim toward the same fundamental goals: fostering adaptive coping, resilience, and what researchers call post traumatic growth. The evidence for how reframing influences our daily psychological functioning is remarkable. When we examine reframing against other emotion regulation strategies like suppression or avoidance, the differences become stark and meaningful. Reframing, or what researchers sometimes call cognitive reappraisal, consistently predicts higher resilience, greater post traumatic growth, and improved psychological well being. Individuals who habitually use reframing strategies demonstrate a superior ability to bounce back from adversity and actually experience positive changes after distressing events. This isn't just about feeling better in the moment. The research shows that reframing helps individuals extract meaning from setbacks, engage constructively with emotions, and adaptively process trauma, leading to better adjustment and recovery over time. During chronic stressors like the COVID-19 pandemic, positive reframing emerged as the most beneficial coping strategy for improving quality of life and reducing depression and anxiety. Contrast this with suppression, which involves inhibiting emotional expression. Habitual suppression consistently links to lower resilience, less post traumatic growth, and higher distress. While some studies suggest occasional benefits, the overwhelming evidence points to suppression being maladaptive, especially for long term well being. The psychological cost of constantly pushing down emotions seems to accumulate over time, creating a kind of emotional debt that eventually demands payment with interest. Avoidance coping presents an even starker contrast. Strategies like denial, distraction, and withdrawal associate with increased depression, anxiety, and poorer quality of life. Avoidance prevents the kind of emotional processing and adaptation that leads to genuine recovery from setbacks. It's like trying to navigate with a map that deliberately omits all the difficult terrain. You might avoid immediate discomfort, but you'll inevitably get lost when challenges arise because you haven't developed the skills to handle what you've been avoiding. What strikes me most about this research is the temporal dimension. Suppression and avoidance may offer some short term relief, providing a temporary buffer against overwhelming emotions, but they ultimately undermine long term resilience and psychological health. The research consistently shows that what feels easier in the moment often creates more suffering over time. Now, I want to talk about something that might surprise you. The effectiveness of reframing isn't just psychological, it's biological. Our brains are prediction machines, constantly generating models of what we expect to happen next based on past experience. When we encounter new information that doesn't match our predictions, we experience what neuroscientists call prediction error. This creates an opportunity for learning and adaptation that reframing exploits in powerful ways. Reframing works by actively engaging with these prediction errors rather than suppressing or avoiding them. When we consciously reinterpret an experience, we're updating our brain's predictive models in real time. This process involves the prefrontal cortex, which can modulate activity in emotional centers, literally changing how we feel about an experience. The elegance of this system suggests that reframing isn't fighting against our neural architecture, it's working with it. The research on memory shows us something even more profound. Every time we recall a memory, it becomes temporarily malleable, open to modification before being stored again. This means that reframing isn't just about present moment coping. It can actually change how we remember and relate to past experiences, potentially transforming the meaning of events that happened years or even decades ago. Regular practice of reframing literally reshapes neural pathways, making adaptive interpretations more automatic and accessible over time. This suggests that what we might think of as personality traits, like optimism or resilience, might actually be skills that can be developed through intentional practice. The brain's capacity for change throughout the lifespan means that it's never too late to develop these capabilities. Let me give you a concrete example of how this might play out in everyday life. Someone loses a job they've held for years, creating an immediate crisis that touches every aspect of their life: their identity, their financial security, their daily routine, their sense of the future. The immediate emotional response might involve shock, disappointment, anger, or fear about the future. These are natural and valid responses to a significant loss that shouldn't be rushed through or minimized. But the meaning they ultimately make of this experience will profoundly shape both their immediate coping and their long term trajectory. One person might frame the job loss as evidence of their inadequacy, proof that they're not good enough, or confirmation that the world is fundamentally unfair. This interpretation, while understandable given the pain of the moment, is likely to lead to rumination, decreased motivation, and difficulty moving forward constructively. The story becomes one of victimhood and powerlessness, creating a psychological prison that can persist long after new opportunities arise. Another person might frame the same event as an opportunity for growth, a chance to explore new directions, or feedback about a poor fit between their values and their previous workplace. This doesn't require denying the genuine loss or pretending to be happy about unwanted change. It involves finding ways to extract meaning and possibility from difficulty. The person might recognize skills they developed, relationships they formed, or clarity they gained about what they really want in their work life. This interpretation opens up possibilities rather than closing them down. The research suggests that this second approach, this capacity for adaptive reframing, can be learned and strengthened through intentional practice. It's not just a personality trait that some people have and others lack. It's a skill that can be developed over time with conscious effort. This democratizes resilience in a way that's both hopeful and empowering. What makes reframing particularly powerful is how it engages our fundamental human need for meaning and agency, two psychological nutrients that seem essential for thriving. Reframing doesn't eliminate suffering, but it helps us transform our relationship with it in ways that preserve and often strengthen our sense of purpose and personal power. This transformation can turn even the most difficult experiences into sources of wisdom and strength rather than just sources of pain. The process also connects deeply to our social nature as human beings. The meanings we make are rarely created in isolation. They emerge through relationship, conversation, and shared narrative construction. This is why therapeutic relationships can be so powerful for facilitating reframing, as the therapist provides a different perspective, helping clients see possibilities they might not access on their own. But this social dimension of meaning making extends far beyond formal therapy into every conversation we have about our experiences. The stories we tell ourselves are influenced by the stories others tell about their experiences, creating a kind of collective wisdom about how to navigate difficulty. When we hear someone describe how they found growth through adversity, it expands our own repertoire of possible interpretations for difficulty. This is why support groups, mentorship relationships, and even casual conversations about overcoming challenges can be so powerful. They offer new templates for meaning making that we can adapt to our own circumstances. The research on post traumatic growth illuminates this process beautifully. People who experience genuine growth after trauma don't just return to their previous baseline. They often report stronger relationships, greater appreciation for life, enhanced personal strength, spiritual development, and new possibilities for their lives. This isn't about minimizing the reality of trauma or suggesting that suffering is good in itself. It's about recognizing the human capacity to create meaning from even the most difficult experiences, to find ways that hardship can contribute to wisdom, compassion, and strength. Yet, reframing isn't always appropriate or possible in the immediate aftermath of trauma or loss. There's a time for processing raw emotion, for grieving, for allowing ourselves to feel the full impact of difficult experiences without immediately trying to find the silver lining. Premature reframing can become a form of emotional bypassing, where we rush to find meaning as a way of avoiding the necessary work of feeling and processing. The timing matters enormously. The most effective reframing often happens after some initial processing has occurred, emerging naturally as we begin to integrate experiences and look for ways to move forward. It emerges from a foundation of having fully acknowledged and felt the impact of what happened. Forced or artificial reframing lacks the authenticity and depth that makes this process genuinely transformative. Communities that have experienced natural disasters, violence, or other shared adversities often engage in collective reframing processes. They might focus on stories of resilience, mutual aid, and community strength that emerged during the crisis. These shared narratives become resources for both individual and collective healing, creating a sense of identity that includes the capacity to overcome challenges together. The cultural dimension of reframing also deserves attention. Different cultures provide vastly different frameworks for understanding suffering, growth, and meaning. Some emphasize individual strength and self determination, celebrating stories of personal triumph over adversity. Others focus more on community support and collective wisdom, emphasizing how groups can support members through difficulty. Some cultures have rich traditions of finding spiritual meaning in adversity, while others emphasize practical problem solving and adaptation. Understanding these cultural variations reminds us that there's no single right way to reframe experiences. What matters is finding approaches that feel authentic and meaningful within our own cultural and personal context. The goal isn't to adopt someone else's interpretation wholesale, but to discover our own capacity for adaptive meaning making. The research consistently shows that this capacity for reframing supports not just psychological well being, but physical health as well. Chronic stress from maladaptive interpretations of events can contribute to inflammation, immune dysfunction, and various health problems. Conversely, the ability to find meaning and maintain hope in the face of difficulty appears to have protective effects on physical health. This mind body connection highlights why reframing matters beyond just feeling better emotionally. As we think about practical applications, it's worth noting that reframing doesn't require formal training or therapy, though these can certainly be helpful. We can cultivate this capacity through various means, journaling about experiences from different perspectives, engaging in meaningful conversations with trusted others, reading stories of how others have found meaning in adversity, or simply pausing to ask ourselves what other ways we might understand a difficult situation. The key seems to be developing what we might call interpretive flexibility, the ability to hold multiple possible meanings for the same experience and choose the ones that best serve our well being and growth. This isn't about self deception or denial. It's about recognizing that our initial interpretations of events aren't necessarily the only or most accurate ones available to us. Often, our first interpretation is shaped by past hurts, current fears, or cultural messages that may not serve us well. Taking time to consider other possible meanings can reveal options we didn't initially see. The practice becomes one of expanding our interpretive repertoire rather than limiting ourselves to whatever story first comes to mind. When we understand reframing as a learnable skill rather than a fixed trait, it opens up possibilities for growth throughout our lives. The person who struggled with adversity in their 20s might develop much greater resilience and meaning making capacity by their 40s or 60s. This isn't just about accumulating experience, though that helps. It's about intentionally cultivating the cognitive and emotional skills that support adaptive responding to life's inevitable challenges. The research on reframing ultimately points toward something profound about human nature: our capacity to create meaning from experience, to find growth through adversity, and to transform suffering into wisdom. This isn't guaranteed or automatic. It requires intention, practice, and often support from others. But it represents one of our most distinctly human capabilities and perhaps one of our greatest sources of hope in navigating an uncertain world. The ability to consciously choose how we interpret our experiences may be one of the most powerful forms of freedom we possess. The evidence suggests that fostering this capacity, both individually and collectively, might be one of the most important things we can do to support human flourishing, not because it eliminates suffering, but because it helps us engage with suffering in ways that preserve and strengthen our humanity rather than diminishing it. When we can find meaning in our struggles, we transform them from purely destructive forces into sources of wisdom, compassion, and strength. This transformation doesn't erase the pain, but it ensures that the pain serves a purpose beyond mere suffering. What emerges from this research is a picture of human resilience that's both inspiring and deeply practical. We're not passive victims of circumstance or prisoners of our initial emotional reactions. We have agency in how we respond to what happens to us. We have the capacity to actively engage with our experiences, to find meaning in difficulty, and to use even our most challenging moments as opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. This capacity doesn't eliminate the reality of loss, trauma, or suffering. It doesn't make everything okay or suggest that all experiences are equally good. What it does is provide a pathway through difficulty that preserves our sense of agency, meaning, and hope. In a world where challenge and uncertainty are constant, this pathway becomes not just helpful, but essential for thriving. The science of reframing ultimately offers us something precious: evidence based hope for our capacity to not just survive adversity, but to be transformed by it in ways that serve both our own well being and our ability to support others facing their own challenges. That transformation becomes a gift we can offer both to ourselves and to the world around us. The stories we tell ourselves about our experiences literally become our reality. When we understand this, we gain access to one of our most powerful tools for psychological healing and growth. The voice in our head doesn't have to be our harshest critic. It can become our wisest counselor, our most compassionate friend, and our most reliable source of encouragement and hope. This transformation is what I've spent years researching and compiling into practical, usable tools. That's why I'm excited to share my new book, The Big Book of Reframes, which contains over 1,000 evidence based reframes for virtually any situation you might face. Whether you're dealing with relationship challenges, career setbacks, health issues, or just the daily stresses of modern life, this book provides specific research backed ways to shift your perspective and change your experience. Because when you change how you see your challenges, you change how your challenges affect you, and that changes everything. The Big Book of Reframes is available now, and I believe it could be the tool that finally helps you break free from the mental patterns that have been holding you back. Because you deserve to experience the freedom that comes from knowing you have a choice in how you interpret your life.